Hey everyone, a little update for you this week since they changed the schedule for classes and we are closed. Our campus is closed all day on Wednesday, so I won't host our live Zoom session like we normally do. I hope you read that in the email. Anyway, here's our class assignments. If you did not get the philosophy of education paper finished, please just email it to me. I will still accept it up until the end of next week. So please do that at your earliest convenience. We are getting down to crunch time here. Chapter 11 quiz, which we touched on last week, is due on Wednesday at midnight still. Please get that done. I'm going to show you a few high points of chapter 12 today, which talks about technology and teaching. And that's due next Wednesday. Okay? We'll have class next Wednesday. That will be our last class, because it's last week of classes. And we'll go over chapter 13, and then that following week is finals week. And so this lesson plan presentation will be your final, on that. And so it will be, you're putting together a lesson plan. You're going to talk through it, talk about it, explain what it is, how to do it, so on and so forth. You can do that in a video. You can do it live during the time that we have set up, for Zoom. You can do a PowerPoint and put that together, do a voiceover. That's totally up to you in terms of how you do it. But if you have questions on it, please ask me, please contact me, and let me know. This teacher dispositions is just a form that you fill out. It's not anything major, but it's something I will get to you that we need for our assessment purposes. You'll get points for doing it and completing it, but it's not something that's going to take a whole lot of time. I will review that and go over that next week during our last class time. Okay, if you have questions, please let me know. Please get a hold of me. Email, text, call, whatever. All right. So this chapter, it talks about integrating technology into teaching, and it's definitely something that the chapter of the book doesn't really gear or capture what we're currently going through in terms of integrating technology into teaching. So it's something that they talk about. This chapter is going to kind of be about technology in the classroom, in the physical classroom, and what are some things that you can do with it. I'm going to talk about or just point out some of the obvious things. Right now, for example, the distance learning that a lot of us are either participating in or will be possibly using as we become a teacher. There's lots of software. There's lots of components that go into teaching online or teaching distance or or remote, whatever you might want to call it. But it's something that takes some coordination and the right type of software to use. Right now, most of our schools are using the Google Classroom for their students and for themselves. And so that is something that as you continue to move forward through the program, that you will get some use in. Okay, there's also other things besides Google Classroom. Microsoft Teams is one I know that other schools are using, but we are working to put together some stuff in our classes to help you become more familiar with Google Classroom if you have not already. Okay, become familiar with it or used it a little bit. So it's a good it's a good piece of software. It's good technology to use right now because you can have students upload their work right there. There's chat stuff there. You can have a video connected right to Google Classroom in your class. But there's lots of different components in terms of technology and teaching right now that as some schools are kind of learning on the fly about. But we're doing a better job in getting people connected to technology and internet, but we still in our area have a ways to go. I know somebody that is a technician that works for West River Telephone, and I talked to him within the last 2 weeks just in passing, and he talked about still having 200 connections to work through, or 200 orders to work through for services. So it's a process, and it's not something that can just be done quickly sometimes. So anyway, just to skip through or go over a few of the high points in terms of this chapter and what technology is kind of in the classroom, in the face-to-face physical classroom, is that there's different types of technology that we can do in different ways that we incorporate it. So you probably have heard blended learning or flex learning or it's a combination of both online, face to face. That's kind of what we had here at the college at the beginning of the semester. Okay. And so that's something that a lot of schools have done. Some schools are currently doing. Some schools have done that before. There's lots of reasons why a school might go to that besides just this pandemic, but some schools are overcrowded. So they use kind of that blended flex model, where some students come in for part of the day, some students come in for the other day. So there's a combination of things on that. I talked a little bit about the issue of the digital divide, or not everyone having access to use technology or access it in their homes. Some schools don't have the capacity to have the full amount of technology that they might like to use. So that can be an issue there as well. So besides the digital divide being a disconnect between technology and what's available at home, can also be a disconnect within some schools as well. So there are things going out to try to fix that. It was pushed forward or kind of had to be pushed forward because of the pandemic, but before that, it was slow developing to our rural areas, especially in terms of that connectivity and the decrease of that digital divide there. Okay? There are, like we had kind of talked about before, online schooling is very common right now, or remote learning, but were previously some online schools or virtual high schools where that is basically all that they relied on previously. They're down in Oglala, Lakota County, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly off the top of my head. There is a virtual high school taking place there already, and the state of South Dakota does have a virtual high school platform that students can use to access not all their classes. Some do use all their classes, but some will pick up a class here or there that maybe their school does not offer. So there are options in terms of that virtual high school component that has been in play previously and will probably continue to be more so in play now after we get through the pandemic and things somewhat return back to a face-to-face situation. I personally think there will be positive changes in terms of classroom, virtual, distance, blended online learning because of what we've had to learn and do in our schools and classrooms. I'm hoping anyway. So there is a little bit of information that has come up in recent studies about virtual and online schooling. I will be interested to see what it might look like in terms of research and looking at this information after a year or so of us doing, or a lot of schools doing, some remote hybrid type learning. So right now, the previous research talks about attendance achievement not being as good as a face-to-face, or at least a blended type of information. And a small percentage, only a quarter of students meet that yearly progress that is needed, that we usually test for during those state assessments. Very supportive of virtual schools. The public still is. There are a lot of good things with that, but previously we still needed to work through some components in terms of student engagement, and we still do in terms of that, and work out some of the kinks, but it'll be interesting to see if it's a little bit different. Okay. Another thing that is had gained some traction and may continue to gain more traction is this thing called flipped classroom, where it's a type of blended learning. Typically in our regular school classrooms, we talk about content. We as the teachers review it. We might do activities. We might do things to introduce them to that information, and then we might provide them with some homework, okay, or some reinforcement activities to do. The flipped classroom is where the students, instead of doing homework at home, they watch a video, or they preview an online lecture, whatever it might be, related to the content, where they learn it that way rather than us doing it in class. And then they come into the classroom, and then we provide the homework, the activity, the project, where we provide assistance to those students during that time to help them understand more deeply the concept that we're learning at. So it's a very good idea and good thought, and students have to be able and prepared to do that if that's something that we want to try to do as teachers. Okay, so we facilitate more in that aspect rather than do more of the traditional teaching that we might consider or think is normal in the classroom. Like I talked about this already, but the technology, the infrastructure that is needed for schools in the classroom to be able to do these things, some of our schools don't have those capacities, although it will be probably getting better after this current situation. Okay? Lots of ways to go about doing that. You guys have probably seen all kinds of these where some schools are one-to-one. Everybody's got some kind of device. There's mobile classrooms. There's mobile carts. People share things. So there's a lot of different ways in terms of what we can use in terms of technology. Besides just having the technology, the iPad, the tablet, the Promethean board, whatever it is, we got to have that right type of software to go with it. Okay, so just throwing a device in front of a student is not going to be the solvent for technology in the classroom. The right software has got to be used for the kids to be able to engage them. For us to do a good job of teaching, we need to include those those right things, because if not, a lot of these things will come up. They talk about the negative effects of technology: easily distracted, short attention span, changes the brain's ability to process information. So we have to be careful that we don't inundate them too much with the technology component of that. But if we use it the correct way, then it's not an issue. I see these technology negative effects for when a student is not supervised by like us as teachers, for example. Okay. And so when we're supervising the use of technology in our classroom, or even outside of our classroom through the remote learning, I feel it's a productive use of that time. But if we just allow that to be used similar to the way it may be used at home, and it gets overused, then that can be an issue. Okay, so this easily distracted, short attention span, ability to process information, all that stuff comes from, my belief, is from that quick information that comes to the students. If they're playing video games, that's quick, instant gratification stuff that's happening. Even on social media, there's typically a quick reaction response where kids don't have to necessarily take time to think and process and use their brain to full capacity. So that is where I believe a lot of those negative effects come, not necessarily from us in terms of how we use that in the classroom. Okay? So interesting research here that on average students in online learning perform better than those receiving face-to-face instruction. Okay? Interestingly enough, if you go back to that first component earlier that we talked about, is that it's opposite of what this research is saying. Okay, so there is some positive effects to that when used correctly and when used positively. Okay, so there are good effects, there are positive effects when we use the right software, and also when we use it in the right way. Okay, laptops have a tendency to improve student motivation and engagement rather than just a plain old sheet of paper and homework type thing. Okay, there is some stuff on gaming in terms of using that in the classroom. It's currently inconclusive, but there has been more research done on that as well. Okay, so a lot of different ways that we can go about, training. Okay, there's all kinds of professional development, PLCs, of course. There's a lot of information. We will continue to upgrade you and to get you information and access to that training. Okay, so if you have any questions, that's kind of the gist of this chapter here. As our time's about running out, I don't want to keep this too long, but make sure you get the quiz done by. It's not going to come back up. So please make sure that you do this Chapter 11 quiz by Wednesday at midnight. Chapter 12 quiz is open till next Wednesday. When you finish your philosophy of education, just email it to me. As always, please, if you have questions, reach out to me. Email, text, call, whatever works best for you. We will talk to you next week. Have a good break.